The silence before death has a sound all its own. Officer Riley James had heard it in back alleys where drug deals went wrong, in abandoned warehouses where missing persons became statistics, and in the split second before gunfire erupted during high-speed chases. But she had never heard it on her own front porch, carried in the low, guttural growl of her German shepherd partner blocking her path home. Titan's massive frame filled the doorway like a living wall, his dark eyes locked onto hers, with an intensity that made her blood run cold. This wasn't the playful bark of a dog eager for dinner, or the protective stance he took during training exercises. This was something primal, urgent, desperate. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the suburban street in upstate New York, where children's bicycles lay abandoned on sidewalks and dinner preparations filled kitchen windows with warm, golden light. Everything appeared normal, peaceful even, except for the 85-pound Belgian, Malinois Cross, who refused to let his pregnant partner enter her own home. Riley's hand instinctively moved to her service weapon, muscle memory from years of responding to threats, but this felt different. Titan had saved her life before during drug raids and manhunts, but those were obvious dangers with clear enemies. Here, standing on the welcome mat her mother had given her for Christmas, surrounded by flower boxes she'd planted when she found out about the baby, the threat felt invisible, yet overwhelming. The metallic scent that tickled the back of her nose was faint but unmistakable, sweet yet wrong, in a way that made her stomach lurch. 5 months pregnant and exhausted from a double shift, Riley wanted nothing more than a hot shower and the triple-decker grilled cheese sandwich her cravings demanded. But Titan's unwavering stance told her that stepping through that door might be the last thing she ever did. The portable gas detector in Lieutenant Casey Morrison's hands erupted in a symphony of electronic screams that shattered the peaceful suburban afternoon. Beep, beep, beep. The digital display flashed angry red numbers that made Casey's face drain of color as she stared at the readings in disbelief. "Jesus Christ, Riley," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the device's persistent warnings. "Your house is a fucking bomb." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Natural gas levels inside had peaked so high that a single spark from a light switch, a cell phone, even the static electricity from Riley's synthetic uniform could have turned her modest 2-bedroom home into a crater that would have made the evening news. Riley's knees buckled as the reality hit her like a physical blow. She grabbed the porch railing for support, her other hand instinctively protecting the life growing inside her. Behind them, Titan sat calmly, his massive head tilted slightly as if to say, "I told you so." The fire department arrived within minutes, their heavy boots thundering across her lawn as they worked to shut off the main gas line. A technician crawled beneath the house, emerging 20 minutes later with news that made Riley's blood freeze. "Faulty connection behind the stove," he announced, brushing dirt from his coveralls. "Slow leak, probably building pressure since this morning. Another few hours and..." He didn't need to finish. Everyone understood the implications, but as Riley watched the organized chaos of emergency, responders securing her home, a darker realization began to creep through her shock. She had cooked pasta on that stove just 2 nights ago. Everything had worked perfectly. No smell, no irregularities, no warning signs. Gas lines didn't just fail overnight, especially not in homes less than 10 years old. Someone had been in her house. Someone had wanted her dead. And the only reason she was still breathing was because a dog had spoken a language that transcended words, using instinct and loyalty to save not just her life, but the innocent life she carried within her. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel K9 Loyal Souls, where we uncover true stories of animals, bravery you won't believe until you see it, and tell us in the comments, what city are you watching us from? In the sprawling tapestry of American law enforcement, where badges shine under harsh fluorescent lights and radio chatter never sleeps, there exists a partnership that transcends the boundaries between human and animal, between instinct and training, between life and death. This is the world of K9 units, where dogs with hearts of steel and noses that can detect danger invisible to human senses work alongside officers who trust their 4-legged partners with absolute faith. Today's story unfolds in the quiet suburbs of upstate New York, where tree-lined streets and white picket fences mask dangers that lurk in the shadows of ordinary life. Officer Riley James never imagined that her greatest enemy would infiltrate the one place she considered sacred, her home, or that her survival would depend entirely on the unwavering loyalty of her German shepherd partner, Titan. At 5 months pregnant and 7 years into her career with the narcotics division, Riley had seen enough darkness to appreciate the light that her unborn child represented. She had chased armed dealers through abandoned buildings, testified against violent criminals who promised revenge from courthouse steps, and walked into situations where backup was 20 minutes away and danger was immediate. But nothing in her training had prepared her for the moment when domestic tranquility would transform into a death trap, when her own front door would become the threshold between life and annihilation. Titan, a 4-year-old Belgian Malinois cross rescued from a shelter and trained in explosive detection, narcotics identification and suspect apprehension, had proven himself countless times in the field. His record was impeccable, his instincts sharp as surgical steel, his devotion to Riley absolute. Together, they had cleared crack houses where children played among discarded needles, tracked missing persons through dense forests where hope faded with each passing hour, and confronted suspects whose desperation made them capable of anything. Their partnership was built on mutual respect, constant communication, and an understanding that went beyond commands and rewards. When Titan alerted, Riley listened. When Riley called, Titan responded. It was a bond forged in shared danger and strengthened by countless hours of training, a relationship that had saved lives and brought criminals to justice. But on this particular Tuesday afternoon, as autumn painted the leaves in shades of amber and gold, their partnership would face its ultimate test in the most unexpected battlefield, the place Riley called home. The events that would unfold over the next several days would challenge everything Riley thought she knew about safety, trust, and the incredible intelligence of the animal kingdom. This is not just a story about a gas leak or a criminal seeking revenge. This is a testament to the profound connection between species, the power of intuition over technology, and the lengths to which one creature will go to protect another. It's about the moments when words fail, but understanding transcends language, when training meets raw instinct, and when the difference between life and death comes down to listening to a voice that speaks without sound. In a world where humans often dismiss animal intelligence as mere conditioning, Titan would prove that sometimes the most sophisticated alarm system is a beating heart filled with unwavering loyalty. The suburban neighborhood where Riley lived epitomized American tranquility, with its carefully manicured lawns, children's laughter echoing from backyard swings, and the gentle hum of evening barbecues. It was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked, where neighbors borrowed cups of sugar, and where the biggest crime was usually a stolen package from a front porch. But beneath this veneer of safety, a predator had been watching, planning, waiting for the perfect moment to strike at the heart of everything Riley held dear. The morning of Tuesday, September 15th, began like any other in Riley James's carefully structured life. Her alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., cutting through the pre-dawn darkness that still clung to her bedroom windows like a familiar blanket. Titan stirred from his position at the foot of her bed, his internal clock as precise as any timepiece, already anticipating the routine that had governed their lives for the past 3 years. Riley's hand moved instinctively to her growing belly, feeling the gentle flutter of movement that reminded her daily of the miracle developing within her. At 22 weeks pregnant, her body had begun the beautiful transformation that made simple tasks like tying her boots a careful negotiation between determination and physics. The baby had been active throughout the night, practicing tiny kicks against her ribs as if preparing for a soccer career that was still months away from beginning. Titan watched her with those intelligent amber eyes that seemed to understand every nuance of her condition, his protective instincts heightened by the changes he sensed in his partner. The German Shepherd had become even more attentive since her pregnancy became visible, positioning himself between her and strangers during routine calls, refusing to leave her side during training exercises, and developing an uncanny ability to predict her needs before she voiced them. Their morning routine unfolded with military precision, honed by years of partnership. Riley showered while Titan waited patiently outside the bathroom door, his ears constantly rotating like satellite dishes, scanning for any unusual sounds. Breakfast consisted of whole grain toast with peanut butter for the protein her doctor insisted she needed, a glass of orange juice for the vitamin C, and a prenatal vitamin that tasted like chalk but promised to give her baby the best possible start in life. Titan received his measured portion of high-quality kibble supplemented with the glucosamine tablets that kept his joints healthy for the demanding physical requirements of police work. The drive to the station took them through the heart of their jurisdiction, past the elementary school where they had conducted safety demonstrations, beyond the park where they trained on weekends, and around the commercial district where they had made their most significant drug bust just 6 months earlier. Riley's patrol car smelled like coffee, leather conditioning spray, and the faint residue of Titan's specialized training treats. The radio crackled with the familiar morning chatter of shift changes, overnight incident reports, and the endless coordination required to keep a community safe. At the station, their day involved paperwork related to a case they had worked the previous week, a routine drug possession arrest that required detailed documentation for the court proceedings. Riley's supervisor had assigned her to desk duty for the remainder of her pregnancy, a decision that frustrated her competitive nature, but which she accepted for the sake of her unborn child. Titan seemed to understand the change in their routine, settling quietly beside her desk. While she typed reports and answered phone calls from concerned citizens, the normalcy of that morning would later feel surreal, like the calm before a hurricane that no meteorologist could have predicted. Every mundane detail, from the way sunlight slanted through the station windows to the sound of Titan's rhythmic breathing as he dozed beside her chair, would become precious memories that Riley would replay endlessly in the days that followed. At exactly 4:15 that afternoon, she gathered her belongings, clipped Titan's leash to his collar, and headed home to what she believed would be another peaceful evening of pregnancy cravings and crime show reruns. The universe had other plans. The drive home from the station should have taken exactly 18 minutes, a route so familiar that Riley could navigate it with her eyes closed. She had counted every stop sign, memorized every pothole, and knew precisely which traffic light would turn red just as she approached during the evening rush hour. But today something felt different from the moment she turned onto Maple Street, though she couldn't quite articulate what had shifted in the familiar landscape of her neighborhood. Titan sat in his usual position in the passenger seat, his harness securely fastened, his massive head turned toward the window as he watched the world pass by with the focused attention of a professional observer. His ears moved constantly, cataloging sounds that escaped human perception, while his nostrils flared slightly as he processed the complex symphony of scents that told him stories about every person, animal, and event that had occurred along their route. Riley had learned to read these subtle signals over years of partnership, understanding that Titan's body language often provided information that technology couldn't capture. As they approached her street, she noticed Titan's posture change almost imperceptibly. His ears shifted forward, his breathing became more deliberate, and his gaze focused with laser intensity on something beyond her vision. It wasn't the excited anticipation he usually displayed when approaching home and dinner time, but rather a tension that made the hair on the back of Riley's neck stand up. Despite her inability to identify any obvious source of concern, the neighborhood appeared exactly as it always did during the transition from afternoon to evening. Children rode bicycles on sidewalks, while parents watched from front porches, elderly. Residents tended to gardens that would soon succumb to autumn's inevitable march toward winter, and the gentle hum of suburban life created a soundtrack of domestic tranquility. Mrs. Henderson waved from her flower garden, the same cheerful greeting she had offered every day for the past 3 years. The postal truck rounded the corner on schedule, its driver raising his hand in recognition, as he had done countless times before. Everything looked normal, peaceful, safe, but Titan's behavior suggested otherwise, and Riley had learned never to ignore her partner's instincts, even when logic argued against them. She pulled into her driveway and sat for a moment, engine idling, while she studied her house with fresh eyes. The small 2-bedroom home with its blue shutters and white trim looked exactly as she had left it that morning. The flower boxes she had planted when she discovered her pregnancy still bloomed with late-season petunias, their purple and yellow faces turned toward the sun like miniature solar panels. The welcome mat her mother had given her for Christmas lay perfectly straight, its cheerful message of "Home, sweet home" visible from where she sat. The front door remained securely locked, its brass handle gleaming in the afternoon light. Nothing appeared disturbed, altered, or out of place, yet Titan continued to stare at the house with an intensity that made Riley's chest tighten with undefined anxiety. She turned off the engine and reached for the door handle, but Titan's low whine stopped her cold. It wasn't a sound she heard often from her stoic partner, a vocalization that carried urgency without aggression, warning without explanation. Riley looked at him carefully, noting the rigid set of his shoulders, the focused direction of his gaze, and the way his nostrils worked overtime to process information that remained invisible to her human senses. Something was wrong. But what? Riley stepped out of her patrol car with the deliberate movements of someone who had learned to balance caution with confidence, her hand instinctively resting on her service weapon as years of training kicked in despite the suburban setting. Titan emerged from the passenger side with fluid grace, his powerful muscles rippling beneath his thick coat as he immediately positioned himself between Riley and the house. His behavior was unlike anything she had witnessed in their 3 years of partnership, a combination of alertness and protective positioning that suggested imminent danger without any visible threat to justify his response. The afternoon air carried the familiar scents of her neighborhood, a mixture of freshly cut grass, barbecue smoke from a distant backyard, and the faint sweetness of late-blooming flowers. But underneath these comforting aromas, Riley detected something else, a metallic tang that seemed to drift from the direction of her front door like an invisible warning. She approached her home with measured steps, her trained eye scanning for signs of forced entry, disturbed windows, or any indication that someone had violated the sanctuary she had worked so hard to create. Everything appeared normal until she reached the front porch, where Titan suddenly planted himself directly in front of the door, like a living barrier. His massive frame blocked her path completely, his amber eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. This wasn't playful obstinance or attention-seeking behavior, but rather a deliberate act of protection that communicated danger more clearly than any alarm system ever could. Riley reached for the doorknob, expecting Titan to move aside as he had done thousands of times before, but instead he shifted his weight forward and released a low growl that seemed to emanate from the depths of his chest. The sound was unlike any vocalization she had heard from him during their years together, not the sharp bark of alert or the playful rumble of contentment, but something primal and urgent that made every hair on her body stand at attention. She stepped back instinctively, her hand moving away from the door as if it had suddenly become electrified, while Titan maintained his position with unwavering determination. The metallic scent grew stronger as she stood there trying to process what her partner was attempting to communicate through his unprecedented behavior. Riley had witnessed Titan detect everything from hidden narcotics to concealed weapons, watched him track suspects through dense forests and locate missing persons in seemingly impossible circumstances, but she had never seen him refuse to allow her access to her own home. His body language spoke of immediate danger, of something so threatening that he was willing to risk her displeasure to keep her safe. The rational part of her mind catalogued possible explanations: a gas leak, an intruder still inside, some kind of structural damage that had created an unsafe environment, but none of these possibilities explained the specific nature of Titan's response. He wasn't barking to alert her to a presence or sniffing around the perimeter to track a scent trail, but rather standing guard like a sentinel protecting something precious from an invisible enemy. Riley tried to step around him, testing whether his blockade was directional or absolute, but Titan moved with her, his massive body always positioned between her and the door. His eyes never left hers, as if he was trying to communicate something vitally important through sheer force of will. The pregnancy made her more tired than usual, and part of her wanted to simply push past her overly protective partner and collapse onto her comfortable couch for the evening routine she craved, but years of trusting Titan's instincts held her back from making what could be a fatal mistake. The phone call to Lieutenant Casey Morrison felt like both a lifeline and an admission of uncertainty, Riley's fingers trembling slightly as she dialed the number of her friend who served with the local fire department. Casey had been her academy roommate years earlier, a woman whose practical approach to emergency situations had saved countless lives and whose judgment Riley trusted implicitly. The conversation was brief but urgent, Riley explaining the strange behavior of her K9 partner and the metallic smell that seemed to grow stronger near her front door, while Casey promised to arrive with detection equipment within minutes. The wait felt eternal, each second stretching like hours as Riley sat on her front steps, with Titan maintaining his vigilant position between her and the entrance to her home. The afternoon sun continued its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across her yard, while neighbors went about their evening routines, completely unaware of the potential disaster brewing just yards away from their own families. Riley found herself studying every detail of her house with new eyes, searching for clues she might have missed, signs of tampering or damage that could explain Titan's unprecedented behavior. The flower boxes looked undisturbed, the windows remained securely locked, and the siding showed no evidence of recent contact or alteration. Yet Titan's unwavering focus on the front door suggested that whatever threatened them lay just beyond that seemingly innocent barrier. When Casey's red fire department SUV pulled into the driveway, Riley felt a mixture of relief and apprehension, knowing that her friend's expertise would either confirm her fears or prove them unfounded. Casey emerged from her vehicle carrying a portable gas detection unit, her expression serious but calm as she approached the porch where Riley waited with her canine partner. Titan acknowledged Casey's presence with a slight tail wag, but refused to abandon his protective position, his body language clearly indicating that the danger he sensed remained, immediate and severe. Casey activated the detection device and began sweeping it around the perimeter of the front door, the electronic instrument humming quietly as it sampled the air for potentially hazardous gases. The first few seconds yielded nothing unusual, the device remaining silent as Casey moved it systematically across the doorframe and surrounding areas. Then, without warning, the detector erupted in a symphony of urgent beeps that shattered the peaceful suburban evening like gunshots. The digital display flashed angry red numbers that made Casey's face drain of color as she stared at the readings in disbelief. Natural gas levels inside Riley's home had reached concentrations so high that a single spark could transform her modest two-bedroom house into a crater that would dominate news headlines for weeks. The numbers on the detector continued climbing as Casey held the device near different areas of the door, indicating that the leak was not only present, but actively worsening as evening approached. Riley's knees buckled as the implications hit her like a physical blow, her hand instinctively moving to protect the life growing within her, while she processed how close she had come to walking into what amounted to a death trap. Behind them, Titan remained calm but alert, his ears constantly moving to track the sounds of approaching emergency vehicles that his superior hearing detected long before they became visible to human senses. The fire department response was swift and professional, heavy trucks arriving within minutes to establish a safety perimeter and begin the complex process of securing a structure filled with explosive gases. Riley watched the organized chaos of emergency responders with a mixture of gratitude and horror, knowing that without Titan's intervention, she would never have lived to see their arrival. The fire department's investigation revealed details that transformed Riley's relief into a cold dread that settled in her stomach like a block of ice. The lead technician, a weathered veteran named Rodriguez who had responded to gas emergencies for over 2 decades, emerged from beneath her house with news that challenged everything she thought she knew about routine home maintenance failures. The gas line behind her stove hadn't simply deteriorated or loosened due to normal wear and tear, but showed clear evidence of deliberate tampering, with tool marks indicating that someone had twisted and damaged the connection with malicious intent. Rodriguez explained that natural gas leaks typically developed gradually over months or years, creating detectable odors long before reaching dangerous concentrations, but this particular breach had been engineered to release large volumes of gas quickly, creating a potentially explosive environment within hours rather than days. The timeline was particularly disturbing because Riley distinctly remembered cooking pasta on her stove just 2 nights earlier without detecting any unusual smells or experiencing any mechanical problems. The implication was terrifying. Someone had gained access to her home within the past 48 hours and deliberately sabotaged her gas line with the clear intention of creating a deadly trap. Riley's mind raced through the possibilities as she watched firefighters ventilate her house, their industrial fans working to clear the dangerous gases that had nearly claimed her life and that of her unborn child. The violation of her personal space felt almost as devastating as the attempted murder itself. The knowledge that a stranger had walked through her home, touched her belongings, and methodically planned her destruction while she went about her daily routine, completely unaware of the danger. The investigating officers took detailed photographs of the damaged gas line, documenting the tool marks and collecting samples that might yield DNA evidence or other forensic clues. Detective Mark Harrison, a serious man with graying temples who specialized in property crimes with violent intent, interviewed Riley about potential enemies, recent arrests she had made, and anyone who might harbor enough resentment to attempt such an elaborate murder plot. The list of possibilities was longer than Riley cared to admit, her years in narcotics enforcement having created numerous adversaries who might view her pregnancy as an opportunity for revenge when she was perceived as vulnerable. As evening fell, and the emergency crews completed their work, Riley found herself standing in her backyard with Titan, staring at her house as if seeing it for the first time. The structure that had represented safety and domesticity now felt like a crime scene, a place where someone had planned her death with meticulous attention to detail. The realization that she could have simply opened her front door and triggered an explosion that would have killed both her and her baby made her legs shake with delayed shock and overwhelming gratitude for Titan's intervention. The gas company technician who arrived to install a completely new line worked through the night, ensuring that Riley's home would be safe for occupancy by morning, but the psychological damage would take much longer to repair. Someone had tried to murder her in the most cowardly way possible, using her own home as a weapon against her, and only the extraordinary instincts of her canine partner had prevented a tragedy that would have destroyed multiple lives. As she lay in a hotel room that night with Titan curled protectively at her feet, Riley realized that this incident was likely just the beginning of a much larger and more dangerous game that someone had decided to play with her life. The hotel room felt like a sanctuary and a prison simultaneously, its generic beige walls and sanitized atmosphere providing safety, while serving as a constant reminder that Riley could no longer trust her own home. She spent the sleepless night scrolling through her phone, checking and rechecking the smart home app that monitored her house's security systems, searching for clues that might explain how someone had gained access without triggering any alarms. Titan lay pressed against her side on the uncomfortable hotel bed, his warm presence the only thing that kept her from completely unraveling as she processed the magnitude of what had nearly occurred. At 3 in the morning, she discovered something that made her blood run. Cold and confirmed her worst suspicions about the deliberate nature of the attack. The motion sensor logs showed activity in her kitchen at 11:38 a.m. the previous day, exactly when she had been at the police station filing paperwork and Titan had been in training with another handler. Someone had been inside her home for exactly 8 minutes, long enough to locate the gas line, damage it with precision, and escape without leaving any obvious traces of their presence. The timestamp proved that this wasn't a random break-in or opportunistic crime, but rather a carefully planned assault that required knowledge of her daily schedule and routines. Riley's hands shook as she called Detective Harrison at his home number, knowing that the revelation of the motion sensor data would transform their investigation from a property crime into an attempted murder case with federal implications. Harrison arrived at the hotel within 30 minutes, his usually calm demeanor replaced by an urgency that reflected the serious nature of the evidence Riley had uncovered. Together, they reviewed the smart home logs in detail, noting that the intruder had entered through the back door, spent exactly 8 minutes in the kitchen area, and departed without triggering any other sensors throughout the house. The precision of the timing suggested someone with detailed knowledge of security systems and confidence that they wouldn't be interrupted during their deadly mission. Harrison immediately contacted the FBI's domestic terrorism unit, explaining that the case involved the attempted murder of a law enforcement officer using improvised explosive methods, which fell under federal jurisdiction regardless of the perpetrator's ultimate motivation. Riley provided a comprehensive list of every arrest she had made in the past 5 years, every criminal she had testified against, and every threat that had been made against her during her career in narcotics enforcement. The list was longer than she had expected, a sobering reminder of how many dangerous people she had encountered during her years of service, and how many of them might view her pregnancy as an opportunity for revenge when she appeared most vulnerable. As dawn broke over the hotel parking lot, Riley realized that her life had fundamentally changed in ways that extended far beyond the physical threat to her safety. She was no longer just a police officer who happened to be pregnant, but rather a target, whose unborn child had become collateral damage in someone's twisted plan for retribution. The violation of her home felt personal in a way that her professional encounters with violence never had, because this attack had been designed to destroy not just her life, but also the innocent life she carried within her. Titan seemed to understand the gravity of their situation, remaining closer than ever to Riley's side and displaying a heightened alertness that suggested he sensed dangers that hadn't yet materialized into concrete threats. The knowledge that someone had walked through her bedroom, touched her personal belongings, and methodically planned her destruction while she slept peacefully, just rooms away, created a paranoia that no amount of security measures could completely eliminate. Detective Harrison's investigation into Riley's case files yielded a name that sent chills down her spine and confirmed her worst fears about the identity of her would-be assassin. Jameson Delco, a small-time arsonist with a history of using gas-related fires to settle personal scores, had been released on parole just 3 weeks earlier after serving nearly 3 years for attempted manslaughter. Riley remembered the case vividly, a domestic dispute that had escalated when Delco decided to murder his sister's boyfriend by rigging a gas leak in the man's garage and waiting for him to light a cigarette. The investigation had been complex, requiring extensive forensic work to prove that the explosion wasn't accidental, and Riley's testimony had been crucial in securing Delco's conviction. During his arrest, Delco had screamed threats at Riley, promising that he would make her pay for ruining his life, and swearing that he would find a way to hurt her when she least expected it. The threats had seemed like the desperate rantings of a man facing serious prison time, but Riley had filed the appropriate reports and moved on to other cases, never imagining that Delco would actually follow through on his promises years later. Harrison's research revealed that Delco had violated his parole conditions almost immediately after his release, failing to report to his assigned officer and disappearing from his registered address without leaving any forwarding information. The parole violation had triggered an automatic warrant for his arrest, but Delco had proven surprisingly adept at staying off the radar of law enforcement agencies throughout the region. Riley's smart home data provided the first concrete evidence of Delco's whereabouts in weeks, placing him inside her house at a specific time and date that correlated with his known expertise in gas-related sabotage. The FBI's involvement brought resources that local law enforcement couldn't provide, including behavioral analysts who created a psychological profile of Delco based on his criminal history and the specific nature of his attack on Riley. The profile painted a picture of a man who harbored deep resentments against authority figures, particularly female police officers, and who viewed Riley's pregnancy as both an opportunity and an additional target for his revenge. Agent Sarah Chen, the FBI profiler assigned to the case, explained that Delco's choice to use gas as his weapon wasn't random, but reflected a signature method that gave him psychological satisfaction by forcing his victims to participate in their own destruction. Riley began working with a federal task force that specialized in tracking fugitives who posed ongoing threats to law enforcement personnel, their expertise proving invaluable in understanding Delco's likely hiding places and behavioral patterns. The investigation revealed that Delco had been conducting surveillance on Riley for at least 2 weeks before the gas leak incident, using a combination of stolen vehicles and temporary shelters to avoid detection while he learned her routines and identified vulnerabilities in her security measures. Surveillance footage from businesses near Riley's neighborhood showed a man matching Delco's description at various locations during the weeks leading up to the attack, always maintaining enough distance to avoid clear identification, but close enough to observe Riley's daily patterns. The realization that she had been unknowingly stalked for weeks made Riley feel nauseated and violated in ways that extended beyond the physical threat to her safety. Titan's behavior during the period leading up to the gas leak suddenly made sense in retrospect, his increased alertness and protective positioning reflecting his ability to detect Delco's presence even when Riley remained completely unaware of being watched. The investigation transformed from a reactive response to an attempted murder into a proactive hunt for a dangerous fugitive who had demonstrated both the means and motivation to make additional attempts on Riley's life. The breakthrough in the investigation came from an unexpected source when a maintenance worker at an abandoned warehouse complex reported suspicious activity that matched the FBI's behavioral profile of Jameson Delco. The worker had noticed someone entering and leaving a condemned building at odd hours, always on foot and carrying what appeared to be supplies for an extended stay. Agent Chen immediately recognized the location's strategic value, situated less than 2 miles from Riley's neighborhood, with multiple escape routes and clear sightlines to monitor law enforcement activity in the area. The warehouse had been empty for over a year since the manufacturing company that owned it had relocated operations to another state, leaving behind a maze of empty buildings that provided perfect cover for someone trying to avoid detection. Riley insisted on participating in the surveillance operation, despite strong objections from both Harrison and Chen, arguing that her knowledge of Delco's behavior patterns and Titan's tracking abilities could prove crucial in confirming the suspect's identity and location. The compromise involved Riley and Titan providing support from a mobile command unit positioned far enough away to ensure their safety, while close enough to deploy quickly if the situation required their expertise. The surveillance team spent 3 days monitoring the warehouse complex using a combination of electronic equipment and human observers, documenting patterns of movement that suggested someone was indeed using the facility as a temporary shelter. Thermal imaging confirmed the presence of a single individual inside the building during nighttime hours, while motion sensors detected regular activity in areas that should have been completely vacant. On the 4th day of surveillance, Titan's behavior changed dramatically when the wind shifted and carried sense from the direction of the warehouse complex. His ears snapped to attention, his nostrils flared with recognition, and he released a low growl that Riley had learned to interpret as confirmation of a familiar and dangerous presence. Agent Chen immediately authorized a tactical team to move closer to the warehouse while maintaining communication with Riley about Titan's reactions to different wind directions and scent concentrations. The K-9's responses provided real-time intelligence about Delco's location within the complex, allowing the tactical team to position themselves strategically without alerting the suspect to their presence. Riley watched through binoculars as federal agents surrounded the warehouse, their movements coordinated and professional as they prepared to arrest a man who had nearly succeeded in murdering her and her unborn child. Titan remained alert and focused throughout the operation, his body language indicating that he could still detect Delco's scent even as the tactical team closed in on the building. The arrest itself was anticlimactic compared to the weeks of investigation and surveillance that had led to this moment, with Delco surrendering without resistance when he realized that escape was impossible. Riley felt a mixture of relief and residual fear as she watched agents escort Delco to a waiting vehicle, knowing that his capture represented both justice for his crimes and protection for her family's future safety. The evidence recovered from Delco's warehouse hideout included detailed photographs of Riley's house, handwritten notes about her daily schedule, and materials for constructing additional gas-related explosive devices that suggested he had been planning more attacks. Agent Chen's debriefing revealed that Delco had been motivated by a combination of personal revenge against Riley and a broader resentment against female authority figures that had been festering during his years in prison. The psychological evaluation ordered by the court would later confirm that Delco posed an ongoing threat to law enforcement personnel and their families, ensuring that his next prison sentence would be significantly longer than his previous incarceration. The arrest of Jameson Delco should have marked the end of Riley's nightmare, but the discovery of additional evidence in his warehouse hideout revealed that his obsession with destroying her life had grown far beyond a simple desire for revenge. Federal agents found detailed floor plans of Riley's house, photographs taken with telephoto lenses that captured intimate moments of her daily routine, and a journal filled with increasingly violent fantasies about different methods of killing her and her unborn child. The psychological evaluation ordered by the prosecuting attorney painted a disturbing picture of a man whose resentment had metastasized during his years in prison, transforming from anger about his conviction into a full-blown psychotic fixation on Riley as the symbol of everything he believed had gone wrong in his life. Dr. Elizabeth Santos, the forensic psychiatrist assigned to evaluate Delco's mental state, explained that his planning had become increasingly elaborate over time, suggesting that he viewed the murder plot as the central purpose of his existence rather than simply a means of settling an old score. The gas leak had been intended as only the first phase of a campaign of terror designed to destroy Riley's sense of security before ultimately killing her in a manner that would maximize her psychological suffering. Agent Chen's team discovered that Delco had been conducting surveillance on Riley for nearly 2 months before the gas leak incident, using stolen vehicles and temporary hiding spots throughout the county to avoid detection while he mapped her routines and identified vulnerabilities in her security measures. The photographs recovered from his hideout showed Riley at the grocery store, walking Titan in the park, entering and leaving the police station, and even relaxing in her backyard during moments when she believed herself to be completely private. The violation felt almost as devastating as the attempted murder itself, knowing that her most personal moments had been observed and catalogued by someone who intended to use that information to destroy her life. Delco's journal entries revealed a twisted logic that blamed Riley not only for his conviction, but also for a series of personal failures that had occurred long before their paths ever crossed, suggesting that his hatred had grown beyond rational grievance into delusional obsession. The prosecution team assembled a case that painted Delco as an ongoing threat to law enforcement personnel throughout the region, arguing that his sophisticated planning and psychological instability made him likely to attempt similar attacks against other officers if he were ever released from custody. Riley's testimony during the sentencing hearing was both cathartic and terrifying, forcing her to relive the fear and violation while providing a victim impact statement that helped ensure Delco would never again have the opportunity to threaten her family's safety. The judge sentenced Delco to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole, a term that would ensure he remained incarcerated until he was well into his 70s and presumably too old to pose a continued threat. Riley felt a complex mixture of relief and residual anxiety as she watched Delco led away in shackles, knowing that justice had been served while recognizing that the psychological scars from his campaign of terror would take much longer to heal than the legal proceedings had required. Titan's role in preventing the original attack was highlighted throughout the trial, with expert witnesses testifying about the extraordinary sensory capabilities that had allowed him to detect the gas leak before it reached explosive concentrations. The case became a powerful example of the life-saving partnership between canine units and their human handlers, demonstrating how animal instincts could provide protection that even the most sophisticated technology couldn't match in critical situations. The months following Delco's conviction brought a gradual return to normalcy for Riley, though the definition of normal had fundamentally changed for someone who had survived such a calculated attempt on her life. The department offered her extended leave during the remainder of her pregnancy, recognizing that the stress of the investigation and trial had taken both physical and emotional tolls that required time and professional support to address properly. Riley initially resisted the suggestion, preferring to maintain her regular routines as a way of proving to herself that Delco hadn't succeeded in destroying her sense of security and professional identity. However, her obstetrician expressed concerns about elevated stress hormones and their potential impact on fetal development, ultimately convincing Riley that accepting help wasn't a sign of weakness, but rather a responsible choice for her unborn child's welfare. Titan seemed to understand that their lives had entered a new phase, displaying a protectiveness that extended beyond his professional training to encompass genuine emotional attachment to both Riley and the baby she carried. His behavior during the final months of her pregnancy was remarkable even by the standards of highly trained police dogs, with veterinary behaviorists noting that he had developed an almost supernatural ability to predict Riley's needs and emotional states. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a specialist in human-animal bonds who studied their partnership for a research project on canine stress response, observed that Titan's attachment to Riley had deepened significantly following the gas leak incident, suggesting that the shared trauma had strengthened their connection in ways that normal training exercises never could have achieved. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, despite the stress of the investigation and trial, with regular checkups confirming that the baby was developing normally and showed no signs of being affected by the traumatic events that had threatened both their lives. Riley found herself talking to her unborn child about Titan during quiet moments, explaining how the dog had saved them both and promising that he would always be an important part of their family story. The nursery she prepared included a special bed for Titan positioned near the crib, acknowledging his role as protector and recognizing that his presence would be crucial for her peace of mind during the vulnerable early months of motherhood. As her due date approached, Riley experienced a mixture of excitement and anxiety that seemed perfectly normal for any first-time mother, but which carried additional weight given everything she had survived to reach this point. The police department organized a baby shower that celebrated not only the upcoming birth, but also Riley and Titan's partnership, with colleagues contributing to a college fund that would help ensure the child's future security. Media coverage of the case had attracted attention from across the country, with animal welfare organizations and canine advocacy groups praising Titan's actions and using their story to highlight the importance of properly funding police dog programs. Riley participated in a limited number of interviews, always ensuring that Titan received proper credit for his life-saving intervention while avoiding sensationalizing the violence that had threatened her family. The book, deal offered by a major publisher, was politely declined, as Riley preferred to maintain her privacy and focus on building a peaceful life for her growing family rather than prolonging public attention to their traumatic experience. Therapy sessions with Dr. Patricia Reeves, a specialist in trauma recovery for law enforcement personnel, helped Riley process the complex emotions surrounding her survival and develop healthy coping strategies for the anxiety that occasionally surfaced. Despite Delco's incarceration, the birth of Riley's son, Caleb James Morrison, marked not just the beginning of a new life, but the culmination of a survival story that had captured the imagination of law enforcement professionals across the nation. The healthy baby boy arrived on a crisp October morning, his vigorous cries filling the delivery room with the sound of life triumphant over the forces that had attempted to prevent his existence. Titan's first meeting with Caleb occurred under carefully controlled circumstances, with veterinary behaviorists and child development specialists observing the interaction between the protective dog and the infant whose life he had helped save months before conception was even complete. The German Shepherd's response to the baby was remarkable in its gentleness and immediate protectiveness, with Titan positioning himself near the bassinet and maintaining a vigilant watch that suggested he understood the precious nature of this small human who represented the successful completion of his most important mission. Riley documented these early interactions through photographs and journal entries, creating a record of the unique bond developing between her son and the dog, who had made his existence possible through acts of instinct and loyalty that transcended normal animal behavior. The story of Titan's intervention had inspired police departments across the country to re-evaluate their canine programs, with many agencies investing in enhanced training protocols that emphasize the importance of trusting canine instincts even when human senses couldn't detect obvious threats. Dr. Michael Harrison, a leading expert in police dog behavior at the University of Pennsylvania, studied Titan's case as part of a broader research project on exceptional sensory capabilities in working dogs, concluding that certain individuals within the canine population possessed abilities that bordered on the supernatural in their accuracy and reliability. The gas detection incident became a teaching case at police academies nationwide, with instructors using Riley and Titan's story to emphasize the critical importance of the human-animal partnership in law enforcement and the potentially life-saving value of paying attention to seemingly inexplicable animal behavior. Titan's official retirement from active duty was marked by a ceremony attended by hundreds of law enforcement personnel, with the police chief presenting him with a Medal of Honor that recognized his extraordinary service and life-saving actions. The retired K9 adapted quickly to civilian life, though he maintained many of his professional behaviors and continued to display the same protective instincts toward Riley and Caleb that had characterized his police work. Riley's return to active duty was delayed by her decision to extend her maternity leave, recognizing that her priorities had shifted in ways that required careful consideration of how to balance her commitment to law enforcement with her responsibilities as a mother. The department supported her decision by offering flexible scheduling options that would allow her to maintain her career while ensuring adequate time with her family, acknowledging that her experience had provided valuable insights into the challenges faced by police officers who were also parents. Titan's story inspired the creation of a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting the families of police dogs, providing medical care and retirement benefits for canine units whose service had gone above and beyond normal expectations. The foundation, established in Titan's name, raised funds to support police dog programs in underfunded departments, ensuring that more communities could benefit from the protection and partnership that these remarkable animals provided to human law enforcement officers who risked their lives to serve others. Years have passed since that fateful Tuesday afternoon when Titan's unwavering stance on a Suburban porch prevented a tragedy that would have claimed 2 innocent lives, yet the deeper questions raised by his actions continue to puzzle scientists, trainers, and philosophers who study the mysterious bonds between humans and animals. Riley often finds herself watching Titan interact with young Caleb, now a curious toddler, whose first word was Titan, and whose bedtime routine includes giving his four-legged guardian a goodnight hug that seems to strengthen an already unbreakable connection. The retired police dog has adapted to family life with the same dedication he once brought to law enforcement, but his protective instincts remain as sharp as ever, manifesting in subtle ways that suggest he continues to perceive threats and dangers that escape human detection. Dr. Sarah Chen, the FBI profiler who worked on Delco's case, has continued studying the incident as part of her research into animal intuition and its potential applications in law enforcement, but even her extensive analysis cannot fully explain how Titan detected the gas leak with such precision, or why his response was so dramatically different from his normal alert behaviors. The scientific community remains divided on whether Titan's actions represented an extraordinary example of trained sensory capabilities, or something that transcends our current understanding of animal cognition and instinct. Riley has become a sought-after speaker at law enforcement conferences, sharing her story not as a tale of miraculous intervention, but as a reminder that the partnership between humans and animals in police work requires a level of trust and communication that goes beyond standard training protocols. She emphasizes that Titan's heroism wasn't supernatural, but rather the result of an intensely developed relationship built on mutual respect, consistent training, and an unwavering commitment to protecting each other in dangerous situations. Yet even Riley acknowledges that certain aspects of that day remain unexplained, particularly Titan's apparent understanding that the threat extended beyond her to include the unborn child she carried, a level of awareness that challenges conventional theories about animal consciousness and empathy. The case has inspired new research into the sensory capabilities of working dogs, with scientists discovering that certain individuals possess olfactory and auditory sensitivities that far exceed the already remarkable abilities of their species. However, these findings only deepen the mystery of how Titan knew to position himself as a barrier rather than simply alerting to the presence of gas, suggesting that his response involved decision-making processes that we are only beginning to understand. As Caleb grows older and begins asking questions about the dog who saved his life before he was born, Riley finds herself wondering whether their family's story represents a unique occurrence or simply one example of countless unrecorded instances where animal intuition has prevented human tragedies. The broader implications of Titan's actions extend beyond law enforcement to fundamental questions about consciousness, communication, and the invisible connections that bind different species together in ways that science struggles to quantify or explain. In quiet moments, when she watches Titan sleeping peacefully beside Caleb's bed, Riley sometimes wonders whether the true measure of heroism lies not in the dramatic gestures that capture public attention, but in the silent vigilance of those who protect us without recognition or reward, guided by instincts and loyalties that transcend words and understanding. Perhaps the most profound mystery isn't how Titan detected the danger, but why he cared enough to risk everything to save lives that existed beyond his immediate pack, suggesting that compassion and sacrifice might be more universal traits than we dare to imagine. And you, what did you think about this story? Tell us in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next videos.